This morning, I want to talk about something called the common good. A Newsweek columnist named Robert Samuelson, he recently wrote that in examining the many economic and social problems that are faced by our society now, it really boils down to one major issue at the center. He said, we face a common choice between a society where people accept modest sacrifices for a common good, or a more contentious society where groups selfishly protect their own benefits. Samuelson is actually not the only social commentator who claims that our most serious social problems are growing out of widespread pursuit of individual interests at the expense of the common good. It is at the root of the problem when it comes to debating businesses' social responsibilities, discussions about environmental pollution, investments in education, transportation, crime, poverty. We face a common choice between a society where people accept modest sacrifices for a common good, or a more contentious society where groups selfishly protect their own benefits. When I read that quote, I immediately thought of Israel, now heading into its 5th election in less than 4 years. I would argue that that reason, that quote, explains everything if you want to understand why Israel is struggling so much to achieve political stability. But this is a global threat too, worthy of reflection this Canada Day weekend, and also because it features prominently in our Parsha. The common good. It is a notion that originated over 2,000 years ago in the writings of Plato, Aristotle, and Cicero. Don't ask me if I read those. It is about having common systems, institutions, an environment that benefits everyone. The contemporary ethicist John Rawls defined the common good as, quote, certain general conditions that are equally to everyone's advantage. The Torah may not have been aware of the specific term, but it was certainly aware of the danger posed by those who challenge normative community institutions for the sake of personal gain and ambition. That seems to underlie the rebellions in Parashat Koraḥ that we read this morning. I say rebellions because many people don't realize that in the Parsha this morning there was not just one rebellion, there were 2, maybe more, rebellions happening at the same time with this one event. There's Koraḥ himself, who doesn't like Moses and Aaron, wants to get rid of them. The Torah mentions Datan and Aviram explicitly complaining about Moshe's failure to bring the people into the promised land, conveniently leaving out the whole sin of the spies last week. The Ibn Ezra suggests that the Levi'im, the tribe of the Levites, Jeremy, that's your people. You're not a Levi? There was a whole debate about whether you are a Levi this week. For the right price, we'll make you a Levi. But the Levi'im were complaining in this week's Parsha because they're less than the Kohanim. They were unhappy about that. There's the tribe of Reuben. Reuben, remember, is the oldest of the 12 tribes. But the Reubenites were very upset because Joshua, they felt, was using his relationship with Moshe to advance the interests of his own tribe, the tribe of Ephraim. So you have 2 tribes fighting against each other, Datan and Aviram, Koraḥ. The firstborns of all the families were very upset, because now that the Kohanim were in charge, the firstborn lose their status. Not fair. And the Midrash adds that Koraḥ was very, very upset also that a guy named Elitzapan ben Uziel, who's mentioned in the Parsha, made himself the leader of the Levites and not Koraḥ. In other words, it's a bunch of squabbling people, all looking after their own self-interest. Everyone felt they had lost something. Everyone felt that they had something taken away from them. Datan and Aviram wanted one thing, Koraḥ wanted something else, the rest of the Leviim wanted another thing, the firstborns. All of these groups ambush Moshe at the same time with their demands, justified or unjustified, all at the same time. And I think what we miss so often in this parsha, the commentators understand that there were different disputes, but they fail to understand what it must have been like for Moshe to be receiving all of these disparate complaints at the same time. What that does to a leader. And of course, there's no way to make everybody happy. Everybody wants something different. And what one wants is at the expense of the other. Individual interests, everybody looking out for what is good for them, innocently or not, failing to consider the chaotic and destructive effects that this would have on everybody else, even just the implications that their own selfish interests in pursuing them would have on anybody else. This is an episode about narcissism. Koraḥ is about narcissism, narcissistic acts of self-interest. It was so bad, this environment, that even Moshe, who was never questioned by God, still goes to God and says, Lo chamor echad mehem nasati velo hareoti et echad mehem. God, just so you know, I haven't taken any donkey from anybody, nor have I wronged any of them. Moshe's defending himself because he's living in an environment where everybody is suspicious of everybody else, making decisions not for the collective benefit, but for their own self-interests. That's why he has to defend himself. This is an episode of tremendous destruction. And it's not about the substance of each complaint. It's not about the validity of anybody's claim. It's about everyone's inability to see the bigger picture, to see beyond what's good for me and think perhaps about what could be good for everyone. Caring about the common good. If you think about this, it really makes little sense for there to be any conflict about the common good at all. Whether we're talking about establishing political systems in the wilderness thousands of years ago, or the more complex institutions of civic life today. Why would anybody be opposed to cooperating towards systems that ultimately benefit everybody? Well, political scientists have explored this question, and they come up with several different answers. One of the common reasons they cite is the free rider problem. The free rider problem. The idea that we are naturally uncomfortable with the benefits that a common good provides becoming available to everyone, including those who choose not to do their part to maintain the common good. Nobody likes free riders. It strikes us as unfair. Another problem, individualism. In our culture, especially today, we place a very high value on individual freedoms and personal rights. You've heard it over and over again. Live and let live. just let other people do what they want to do and leave me alone to do what I want to do. And so our primary focus as a society becomes about allowing each person to do their own thing, and community institutions helping everybody, they get placed lower down on the list of priorities. But maybe more important than these and other reasons might be the explanation that the very idea of a common good is inconsistent with a pluralistic society. Let me explain. All of us are different, and different people have different ideas about what is worthwhile and different ideas about what constitutes the good life. These differences have increased dramatically during the last few decades as we've become ever more interconnected and as life becomes ever more complex. Even if we could all agree on what we valued, we would certainly disagree about the relative values that these things have for us. You and I may agree, for example, that a good healthcare system, a healthy educational system, and a clean environment are all parts of the common good, but it's likely that we will disagree on how high each one should be on our list of priorities. We live in a world of limited resources. Not all of us are going to come to the same determination about the relative values of each of these goods. Pluralism means that in our efforts to achieve a common good, there will be winners and there will be losers. Welcome to the Canada of 2022, where everyone feels like either a winner or a loser. We adopt and promote the views of some and have to necessarily exclude the views of others. That's the way the common good works. Therefore, if we care about the common good, maybe we have to revive a word that has become the dirtiest word in politics today. The word is compromise. The ugliest, worst word you can say. Compromise? That means you don't have any principles. When you compromise, even though you disagree, you show respect for the position of your opponent. This is just as applicable to marriage as it is to modern-day politics. The first thing compromise does is it gives respect to the view of the other. You show that even though you disagree, you are prepared to listen, you are prepared to consider. When you compromise properly, nobody gets exactly what they want. But the status quo improves for everyone. When we are not prepared to compromise, when compromise is a dirty word, especially in a polarized political partisan environment like ours, the common good becomes a joke. The common good becomes a dream. It becomes impossible. And we do become a bunch of rivaling groups committed only to protect what is in our own self-interest. No matter how committed to individualism and individual freedom and libertarianism we might be, I offer to you today that we ought not give up on the ideal of achieving a common good for everyone. The lesson of Parashat Koraḥ is that for the Israelite community struggling in the wilderness, a focus on the common good is essential, not just because of what would result, but because pursuing a common good is in itself uniting. It brings everyone together no matter what is achieved in the end. That unity is what makes it good. Unity bends us in the direction of love, in the direction of justice, neighborliness, and charity. Even more so today, we need to reflect on broad questions concerning the kind of society we want to become and how we are to achieve it. We have to view ourselves as members of the same community and find those goals that unite us. We have to respect the freedom we have to pursue our own individual interests, but we also have to recognize and further the goals that we share in common. I'll close with a story told by Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, of blessed memory, the Kotzker Rabbi. I always find some of the best Hasidic stories are about him. Not just because he was brilliant, but because he was strange. He was unique. He did things differently than other Hasidic leaders. Other Hasidic leaders would stand in their houses and receive hundreds of people a day who had come for a blessing or maybe some advice about a decision that they were facing in life. But not the Kotzker. It was very hard to get to him. He was inaccessible, did not enjoy meeting hundreds of people a day. He would be very selective with who he would meet with. And his rival, Rabbi Yitzchak Avorki, once got very upset with him and said, "Why is it you're more popular than me? There are thousands of Jews who want to come see you for a blessing and for guidance. Why are you making it so hard for people to meet you?" And Rabbi Menachem Mendel told a story. This is the story he told. He said, there was once a holy billy goat whose horns were so tall they could reach the stars. At midnight, every night, the goat would stand on his hind legs, and his horns would touch the stars and cause them to sing. One day, a Jew from a village got up early to get to the market and realized that he had lost his snuff box of tobacco. The man was distraught at his misfortune, and the goat felt sympathy for him. The goat offered his horns to the man, from which the man could cut a piece of the horn and fashion himself a new snuff box. Well, that's what he did. The Jew returned home and innocently marveled to his fellow villagers about the incredible fragrance the goat horn snuff box produced. When the villagers heard about the goat's horns, one by one, they eventually sought out the billy goat and took small pieces of the horn. The Jews enjoyed their new snuff boxes, but the goat's horns became shorter and shorter and shorter, and eventually they could not reach the heavens. And now there was nothing left in the world that could arouse the stars into song. True story. All right. With this fable, you understand the lesson? The Kotzker was expressing his fear that if he gave too much of himself to each innocent chassid who approached him, he would have nothing left unique to give the world. So like the Jews in this story, who take pieces of the goat's horns for themselves without any concern for the effects it would have on others, we too often fail to consider the impact lobbying for our own personal benefits have on the community and society as a whole. Let us become more aware of the dangers of parochial self-interest and strive for a country where everyone can win, when bickering can be replaced by compromise, when competitions for power and advantage give way to increased cooperation. On this special weekend, let us ask ourselves what we can do for the common good, how we can get a little further away from the division and a little closer to hearing the stars sing for all of us again. Shabbat Shalom.